Leverage classroom instruction and technology for ACT success. This is video 2 of 2. We did the first 45 minutes in video 1. So one of the things we'd like to do is just use the calculator effectively and efficiently. So here's problem number 24. Pause the video to read the problem and solve it. Resume when you're ready. All right, so this one we're going to use the calculator to calculate the slope. We'll get a fraction template, and we'll subtract the y's, 5 minus 7 in the numerator. And in the same order then, 1 minus 17 in the denominator. And the answer comes out as a fraction 1/8, which is letter F. Number 48, pause is needed. So for this one here, what we're going to have to do is we're going to add radical 5 to each part of this inequality. So I'm going to get -1 plus a square root of 5. And then also it'll be 4 plus radical 5. And so we want the integers that are in between these two decimal numbers here. And so that would be letter G. Number 49, pause is needed. So this one, reading this here, a 45-mile-per-hour wind can exert a maximum force of 50 pounds on a 1 square foot flat surface. So here's a formula that we're provided with that is probably new to everybody. Okay, so substituting the numbers, 50 for the force, K we don't know, 1 for S, and 40 for the speed in miles per hour, velocity. And then we'll get K is equal to 5 over 160. The second part, if we substitute in here, we'll get the force is that constant times 2 for S times 80 squared. So we'll just need to use a calculator to do that. So again, I need a fraction template of 5 over 160. Get out of the denominator. Times 2 times, I don't need the parentheses, but I'm going to put them in anyway, so that I can make sure I'm squaring the right number there. And 400 is our answer. Letter D. Number 50, pause is needed. So I divided this up into two rectangles. One is 4 by 10. The other one is 16 by 4. So the areas are 40 square feet and 64 square feet. Recall that the volume of something is the area of the base, which would be this L-shaped shape, times the height, which is 4 inches, but we want to make sure we're in cubic feet, so we have to think of 4 inches as 4/12 or 1/3 of a foot. So the area of the base is 104 square feet. Multiply that by 1/3 of a foot. And then we need to divide that by 0.6 to get the number of bags. So again, we're just going to use 104 times 1/3. And then when I press the division sign, it says take the last answer and divide that by 0.6. because that's the number of cubic feet per bag. And we can't buy 57 bags, we have to buy 58 bags, which is letter J. Number 55, pause is needed. All right, so I drew a picture here. Kansas City here towards the west, St. Louis towards the east, 68 miles per hour this way, 57 miles per hour this way, and 240 miles apart. So I'm going to let x be the number of hours that each car travels. And so it's going to be 68 miles per hour times the number of hours plus 57 times the number of hours has to be equal to 240. And that's 125x equals 240. And so x is equal to that. And so let's go ahead and see what that is. And if I do 240 divided by 125, I do get a decimal. And I want it, that's 1 hour and 0.92 of an hour. So to figure out what that is in hours and minutes, what I like to do is subtract the 1 so that we have 0.92 of an hour and multiply that by 60 minutes per hour. And so we can see to the nearest minute it's going to be 55 minutes. And so an hour 55 past 2 o'clock would be letter D, 3:55 p.m. I really like this idea of how you can convert units that way. Pythagorean theorem in triples. Number 17, pause is needed. So 0.3 miles due east, 0.4 miles due north, straight line distance. So I went ahead and drew a right triangle, 0.3 due east, 0.4 due north, and this is the distance, the straight line distance that we want to find. And you recall 3, 4, 5 right triangle, if we divide each by 10, we get, or multiply by 1/10, we get 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. So that would be our answer, letter D. We could also do this with a calculator here. We could say that 0.3 squared plus 0.4 squared equals this squared, and then take the square root. So the square root of 0.3 squared plus 0.4 squared is, not much of a surprise, 0.5. By the way, we definitely prefer that our students recognize and know Pythagorean triples. It makes life much easier on these exams. Number 37, pause is needed. So for this one here, I made a right triangle drawing. Let x be the number of hours until they're 200 miles apart. We call that distance equals rate times time. So we've got 40x is one of the right angle legs and 60x is the other leg. And so this distance, the distance apart has to be 200 miles, the hypotenuse. So using Pythagoras' theorem, the quantity of 60x squared plus the quantity of 40x squared is the hypotenuse squared. Adding them up, 5200x squared, and dividing both sides by 5200, we can now go ahead and use the calculator to simplify that. So I'm going to take the square root of a fraction, oops, not x, but a fraction, alpha x, 40,000 divided by 5200, and 2.77 seems to be the answer, and rounding that to the nearest tenth, letter B. About 2.8 hours. Distance formula that's related to Pythagoras' theorem. This is a question number 28. Pause the video to do it. Resume when you're ready. So recall the distance formula, subtract the x's and square them, subtract the y's and square them, add them, and then take the square root. But one of the things you'll notice is that the y coordinates are identical. So when I subtract them, I'm going to get 0. So I don't really need to worry about this part right here. That's going to be 0. So let's let the calculator do the work, because subtracting fractions and squaring is going to be kind of nasty. So again, second square root. Do need parentheses. It doesn't matter which order I subtract them, because I'm going to square the answer anyway. So I'll go ahead and use alpha y equals to get the mixed number. And 5, right arrow, 1, down arrow, 3. Then get out of that fraction. Minus a negative, again, alpha y equals for a mixed number, number 2. 1, arrow, right arrow, 5, down arrow, 9, right arrow, right parentheses. Let me double check that. 5 1/3 minus a negative 1 5/9. Quantity squared, and then I'm going to take the square root of that. And my answer is 62/9. So what I need to do is alpha y equals again, and notice number 3 is rewrite as a fraction to a mixed number and the other way around. So it says take the last answer and write it as the other one. So there's our answer, 6 8/9, which is letter J. So miscellaneous ones without a calculator, I thought these were some good questions to look at to practice with your students. Number 46, pause is needed. Resume when you're ready. All right, so for this one here, these are the values. It says that they're consecutive positive integers. So I chose A to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so doing that then, let's look at what we get here. So A over B would be 1/2. B over C would be 2/3, so 2/3 is in the running. C over D would be 3/4, so H is in the running. A plus B would be 3. B plus C would be 5. That's 0.6, that's 0.75, so this is still in the running. And then B plus C, 5, over C plus D, 7. I'm going to have to check that out on a calculator there to see what I get. So let's try that. So 5 divided by 7 will give me a decimal right away. And I can see that 3/4 or 0.75 is the greatest value there. H. Number 52, pause as needed. So this one was a tough one here, I thought. So starting with the average of 10 scores is X. What that means is if I would add them all up, the answer would be 10X. Okay, now think about that. Similarly, if we remove 2 scores and the average is Y, then the sum of those 8 numbers that are remaining will be 8 times Y. The difference of those 2 numbers, the larger minus the smaller, of the highest and lowest scores is 10x minus 8y, because we've taken out the largest and smallest scores. But to find the average, we have to take that sum and divide that difference by 2. And when we do that, that is going to be letter J. Not one that you could do on the calculator, that's for sure. And I think this is the last one. Pause is needed. Resume when you're ready. All All right, so since the one root is -3, that means the factor is going to be the quantity of x plus 3. The other factor must be of the form some quantity of a times x minus whatever that root is where r is positive. Hopefully you would agree with that, because we need to get ax squared in the first term. So our factors are going to be the quantity of ax minus r times the quantity of x plus 3. Now r's got to be 2 because negative r times positive 3 has to be -6. So that's only going to be work if r is positive 2. So I can go ahead and substitute that in there. And then when I partially expand, that is, look at just the x terms, I'm going to get -2x plus 3ax has to be equal to this middle term here, 13x. And when I divide each term by x and solve this, a turns out to be 5, which is not our answer, by the way. A must be 5. So if a is 5, the other factor has to be that a, 5 times x minus the 2. That's not one of our answers. We have to factor out the 5, which is not something we normally do, but can. And so the other linear factor is the quantity of x minus 2/5, the letter H. I'm sorry, letter F. Sorry about that, letter F. This concludes the second video of 2. Reminder that all materials are at this website right here, including a link to the video for the first one. So you can get the PDF of all of them that you share with your students, PDF of all the problems and their solutions, or you can look at the videos. Hope this worked for you. Have a good one.